Pakistan-Afghanistan experience is becoming more pertinent to all the discussions that are taking place about South Asia. And perhaps more people are getting interested into it with the US withdrawal that has happened after 20 years, if you count it from 9/11. But Afghanistan has been in a state of war and conflict and turbulence and turmoil, and I'm running out of words here, since 40 years now. Pakistan-Afghanistan relationship actually did not start on a good foot. Initially, there were problems on our borders, which was contested by Afghanistan, and Afghanistan did not recognize us immediately in the United Nations. But after that, we got over it and we moved forward, and the relationship was in on decent footing, if I may say so. But gradually over the years, the relationship deteriorated, largely because I think the foreign power intervention in Afghanistan, especially that of the United States, put Pakistan on the wrong side of things. So initially, when the Afghan Jihad started and Pakistan became a part of the international coalition to push the Soviet Union out of Afghanistan, I think we never recovered from that. Despite the fact that Pakistan hosts the largest number of refugees in human history in Pakistan, they're still on our land. There are still refugee camps 40 years down the lane. And what Pakistan is literally petrified about, because that is exactly the word that Prime Minister Imran Khan used, that Pakistan is petrified that more refugees will come in from Afghanistan into Pakistan if civil war sets in. And I don't think it's a if now, a civil war has already set in. We are countries, our futures are completely intertwined. I think there are no two other countries whose future, progress, development is so closely linked. On one hand, and on the other hand, global peace and regional peace is also hostage to the relationship. So I think it's an extremely intricate, complex relationship. And I think there is this feeling, at least on Pakistan's side, or there's this thrust on Pakistan's side, that we should move forward, turn the page on history, be able to sort of set aside our differences or reconcile our differences and move on. Will that happen? I don't know. But this book that I'm talking to you about is an edited book. It has been edited by me and a colleague, Dr. Nausheen Wasi. And in this book, what we tried to do is that we did not just wanted what Pakistanis had to say about this book. So we requested 6 participants, 6 contributors from Afghanistan and 6 contributors from Pakistan side. And except for editorial work, we've not really impinged upon the freedom of the author. And we've allowed them to write whatever they wanted to write, except that when we initially requested them to write for us, we asked them to put away with the blame game, have an academic, objective thrust to the situation. And that is why we titled the book Pakistan-Afghanistan Relations, Pitfalls and Way Forwards. Some very interesting papers came. And I would also like to perhaps point out here that these papers are from people who carry extremely high profiles in their respective countries. They are academicians, they're policy makers, and all of them are opinion makers and influencers. And there's a lot of credibility to what they say about issues. So there is actually a unanimity of view. Both contributors from Pakistan and Afghanistan say that the animosity between the two countries has been self-defeating, and we should move forward. And how international interventions have not allowed this relationship to flourish. So either from Pakistan's perspective, either this relationship was viewed from US, it was contingent to US, or later on it became contingent to India. So Pakistan, being India-centric, US-oriented, determined our relationship with Afghanistan, which of course became problematic because it was never a bilateral relationship. It was never premised on what Pakistan and Afghanistan wanted to do and what was their way forward, what suited the two countries. It was always what the powers wanted. It was Soviet Union, then it was Pakistan's insecurities, then it was what United States wanted, then it was how terrorism, the whole paradigm of terrorism was just blown out of proportion. And of course, Pakistan found itself in a position where you were either with us or against us. That was exactly what was said to us. And it somehow just, all of this deteriorated the relationship between Pakistan and Afghanistan. People say Pakistan once again is at crossroads. I will not deny that it is, and we are hoping that the way forward would be such that we will be able to address the sensitivities of both the country, of each other largely. We've used proxy wars against each other. Our lands have been used against each other. Foreign powers have exploited the vulnerability of our relationship. So I don't know if Pakistan and Afghanistan are ready to move beyond it, but perhaps that is the only way forward. So I think that is the crux of how the situation stands today. Pakistan is completely convinced that there is no other option but to have a political solution to the situation that is unfolding in Afghanistan. And more importantly, Pakistan was the only country that among the first, and then only 3 countries recognized the Taliban capture of power in the 80s. But today, Pakistan is insistent that this capture should not be on the basis of force, and it should be legitimate, and there should be a constitutional framework through which it happens. Moreover, it should be indigenous. I don't know how many of you know this, but you usually hear this term. At least it's often repeated between Pakistan and Afghanistan when we talk to each other, and that is an Afghan-owned, Afghan-led peace process. And Pakistan, this term was coined by a former Foreign Secretary of Pakistan, Ms. Tehmina Janjua, and it's now become a buzzword whenever Pakistan-Afghanistan relations are discussed. The irritants exist. Durand Line is an irritant, of course. The irredentist claims on Pakistani land by Afghanistan are irritants. I think the most difficult irritant, or the most contentious irritant, is Taliban. And somehow Pakistan feels validated that now a faction that they have supported are in a position of power, and through their resilience, they've brought Pakistan back into the game. But I think Pakistan has also learned from the past mistakes, and Pakistan does not want to get drawn into this conflict. And this is backed by a shift in Pakistan's foreign policy, which we are now openly articulating and saying, and that is that Pakistan just does not want to be a geostrategic state, but wants itself to be viewed as a geo-economic state. And when we say that, we actually want to walk our talk. And there are 2 developments that need to be factored in when we talk about that. One is, of course, China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. You all know about it. But the other, which a lot of people here in Pakistan see as a watershed event, is the new Quad. That is the diplomatic forum that is being explored. And it was Uzbekistan, Pakistan, Afghanistan, and the United States of America that signed this. And the thrust was to promote connectivity and peace in Afghanistan. So the fact that connectivity and peace reinforce each other is a concept that China had has been working on for the last 10 plus years now, perhaps more. And it seems that US is coming on board too. And Pakistan, the 2 buzzwords that you hear in Pakistan about foreign policy is balance and connectivity. So if you bring it into the relationship between Pakistan and Afghanistan, I think that is the crux of the situation. Pakistan wants its relationship with Afghanistan balanced, does not want to become a part of camp politics, and wants to promote connectivity and its geo-economic thrust at every cost and any cost, and is supportive of it, and is wary that once again it would not be made the scapegoat of the failures of others in Afghanistan. Afghanistan was extremely sensitive about the fact that we actually thought that we can control the situation in Afghanistan. Or for that matter, and some people in Pakistan called it the 5th province of Pakistan. Pakistan has literally backtracked from them. We, in all our discussions here also, we say that the whole concept of strategic depth which was coined by General Aslam Beg, was flawed to begin with. And Pakistan now completely has turned its back on it. We don't think that any country, I mean, we respect Afghanistan's sovereignty completely. And the term that we now use is Afghan-led, Afghan-owned peace process, which is in some ways the antithesis of the concept of strategic depth. So one is this: Pakistan remains completely committed to an Afghan-owned, Afghan-led peace process, one. Two, Pakistan does not want to back any factions in Afghanistan. Although Pakistan, of course, has a soft corner for Taliban, I would not be objective in my analysis if I didn't get that factored in. But at the same time, Pakistan is also extremely wary of it. And we've also learned our lessons in 40 years. And one of those lessons is that our control on the Taliban is limited. And it has become more limited with time, where the Talibans have become more politically savvy. They have now reached in many important capitals of the country, of the world, which includes, of course, Qatar. The Doha peace process is there. China just hosted a dialogue with the Taliban leadership. There was one dialogue in Tehran. There was another in Moscow. Britain actually said that if they come into power, they would not have a problem with working. And so this makes Taliban a very independent political entity. And what Pakistan is wary of is that if these peace talks do not do not move forward the way the international community or perhaps even people in Afghanistan wanted to, Pakistan may be blamed for the failures. And that is something which really scares Pakistan. And one of the things that we've done is that we've fenced the border. And this is one of the most difficult and the longest borders in the world that you have. But despite that, Pakistan has fenced the border. We have border management mechanisms in place. So when if I may quote this incident, there were a few Afghan army officers who contacted our side and they wanted to move on to Pakistan's side. We allowed them to come in, but then we followed all norms of international law. It was disclosed on the media. It was conveyed to the Afghan government. We allowed them to come in as per the protocols of international law, but at the same time, we would want them to go back. So I think what I would want to perhaps answer you here is that Pakistan does not want to get dragged into this conflict yet once again. All Pakistan wants to become a part of is facilitate peace, negotiations, bridge between states, between factions or whatever, or exercise whatever influence that it has on Taliban to ask them to bring the violence down and come to the negotiating table. Pakistan has played a very important role there. But I also want to add a word of caution here. Pakistan is committed to all this. Pakistan's own economic survival is hinged upon the taking off of the corridor paradigm. But I think Pakistan has limited control over the Taliban now. We can influence them only to an extent. They know exactly what they want. They're using both maneuver and strategy in the way they are functioning in Afghanistan. They remain in the peripheries. They haven't attacked the centers. They're building up pressure. They keep violence on the ground as a bargaining chip. And I don't think Pakistan can influence them to do otherwise. And that is what we want to put forward. But that Pakistan now is a geo-economic, pro-peace state that does not want to get dragged into a conflict and wants to be a part of any initiative that would promote peace, because our fates are intertwined. One sensitivity, of course, that remains as a huge irritant is how India, and Pakistan is a very India-centric state, so how India has acquired this huge strategic space in Afghanistan, which it uses against Pakistan. Now we have proofs. We've prepared 2 dossiers that have been handed over to the United Nations. Many American officers who've served, senior American officers who've served on the ground in Afghanistan have agreed to this, that yes, India uses the space in Afghanistan against Pakistan. It has opened another front against Pakistan, and Pakistan remains extremely sensitive to this. I personally think that a discourse which is devoid of a lot of political mayhem may contribute in clearing the atmosphere between the two countries, because the papers that we got from Afghanistan are actually rooted in history. And it's interesting that how those papers question the fact that why did the relationship between Pakistan and Afghanistan take this trajectory, which could have been completely different and far more beneficial, far more beneficial for both these countries, and how the path Pakistan and Afghanistan has chosen for themselves have been self-defeating. There are chapters on proxy wars from both sides of experts who completely understand the situation, and both of them, there's unanimity of view. So I personally think that this book will go a long way in Pakistan and in Afghanistan of bringing the synergizing the Afghan opinion and the Pakistan opinion. And I think it's also in some ways pioneer work, because usually you will have a book from a Pakistani on Afghanistan, or a book from an Afghan perspective on the situation. In this book, there are 6 contributors from Pakistan and 6 contributors from Afghanistan. Like I said earlier, people who have extremely high profile, and there's credibility to what they're saying. And I am hoping that the fact that the reader or the policymaker or students or whoever reads this book will be able to see that how reason prevails, how sanity prevails, despite the fact that we've invested so much in conflict.